Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tom Rivera, and welcome to our session on the South Colton Oral History Project. Today is January the 30th, Friday, January the 30th, and we're on the fourth floor of the Fowle Library. And with us this afternoon is Mr. Frank Acosta behind the camera. And Frank, if anything comes up, just kind of go ahead and chime in and ask us whatever questions you might have, okay? And also, Mr. Robbie Madrigal, who has joined us, and Robbie, welcome to our session this afternoon. And our person that we're interviewing this afternoon is Mr. Frank Aguayo. Frank Aguayo, welcome to Cal State and welcome to our session of the oral history of South Colton. Welcome, eh?
Thank you, Mr. Rivera.
Frank, let's get started. And let me ask you the first question. I understand that your grandfather, great-grandfather, was one of the original settlers of the Aguamansa settlement here in, just outside of Colton, the Aguamansa settlement. And that was in 1842 that settlement was originated. Tell us about your grandfather, Loreto. First of all, his first name was Loreto, and his last name was
Aguayo.
Aguayo, Loreto Aguayo. Tell us about him. When did he first, or how did he happen to land up in, where was he from, first of all, and why did he come to Aguamansa?
To my nearest recollection of some of the information that I've gathered, there's a strong possibility that he might have migrated in from a place called Zahuaripa, Sonora, Mexico, and got in on the missions as far as helping to build them, because the Aguayo clan, as far as I know, were skilled in various trades. And I believe that was probably his beginning.
And when did he land in Aguamansa? What year was he in Aguamansa? Was it the 1840s or?
About 1842, I would say, around and through there, yes.
And his wife's name was?
His wife was Guadalupe Mesa.
Guadalupe Mesa. And I understand Mesa is one of the original families that settled Aguamansa.
I think so, yes.
And what did your grandfather do in Aguamansa? Was he? You mentioned that he was a merchant.
He was a grocer. The only thing I can imagine is that he was probably like a general store owner and operator.
Okay.
That supplied the community.
And Aguamansa was the first settlement here in the area.
Yes.
Now, where would he get his merchandise?
He, according to my some of my aunts that I gathered some information from, was in possession of the old covered wagons, I guess, and he would annually or semi-annually, whatever the needs were for his supplies, would trek into Zahuaripa and replenish the supplies that he needed, and then trek back into Aguamansa.
That was a long trip. It was
a very
Yeah.
long trip.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I believe in some of my research that one of my aunts was born on the way back from one of those trips.
It was a long trip. Now, you mentioned that your great-grandfather married Guadalupe Mesa.
Yes.
And did they have any children?
How many do I count there? One,
Yeah,
two,
go ahead.
three,
Go ahead.
four.
Name the children.
Yes, he did, or they did. First one that I can see here was Georgia Aguayo Rubidoux.
Gregoria Aguayo Rubidoux.
Yeah.
Okay. And Rubidoux was the other settlement that was close to Aguamansa. That was in the Riverside area.
I can't place
Yeah,
another
because we do,
settlement.
yeah, because we do have a Ruby Doe.
We have
town.
a city of Ruby Doo.
Right, right.
We have Ruby Doo Mountain.
And that was also part of the early settlement.
Yeah.
Who else did you have? You have Josefia, Aguayo,
Josefa Aguayo Rimbaugh.
Rimbaugh.
Yes.
So Rimbaugh, was he the mayor of Colton at one time?
Yes, he was. I don't know the exact dates on that, but he
Uh-huh.
was.
But he's part of
He
that.
was also a lawyer.
Uh-huh. So he's part of the Aguayo clan.
Yes.
He's part of the Aguayo clan. And you have another one here, Rosario Aguayo.
Yeah, but there was Rosenda Aguayo Smith.
Okay, okay.
Part of the Smith part of that originated in Baja California and worked his way up into California and then eventually into the Aguamatsa settlement.
Okay, so that's where the family came from. What about Eloisa Aguayo Espinosa?
Okay,
Because Espinosa is one of the families that settled from
Yes.
New Mexico.
yes.
Yes.
I couldn't find much on her
Uh-huh.
in my research,
Mm-hmm.
other than that she was one of the older daughters of
Mm-hmm.
of my great grandpa Loreto.
So Loreto and Guadalupe had 5 children.
5 children, yes.
And they all intermarried into the families that settled Aguamansa.
Aguamatsa, yes.
Okay.
That's
And
correct.
let's see, now, how long did your grandpa live in Aguamansa? When did he pass away?
According to my records, in or about the 1870s.
Okay, and what about great grandma?
She lived on into I'd say about in the 1880s around it, so
Okay.
maybe even the 1900s.
Okay, okay. And let's see, you have a special landmark or mark for your grandfather. Tell us about the gravestone that you made for your grandfather.
Yes, that is an idea that my father had during his lifetime, and that was nothing more than to identify the place of burial of my grandpa and grandma.
Great grandpa, my grandpa, great grandmother. and
Yeah,
great
all of
grandpa.
them. And mostly he wanted to put one on his dad's gravestone,
Uh-huh.
but he never had enough money to do it.
Mhm.
And by the time he did get to a point to where he was making some good money, he passed on.
Mhm.
So that idea, I nursed it for years. And at one point in my lifetime, about maybe 4 years ago, I was able to fulfill his idea and his dream.
And what did you put on the gravesite? Do
Just
you
what-
remember?
This is it right here.
Oh, what you did, you put the family name Aguayo, and then you put the great grandparents, and then you put their children,
Yes,
and then your grandfather listed his family, and you're the son of Joseph Robert Aguayo.
that's correct.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 brothers and sisters.
I could not locate my great grandfather's site where he
Uh-huh.
was buried because
Uh-huh.
it's so old.
Uh-huh.
And it, there was no markers in that area where he was supposed to be. So the next best thing I could do was go, I knew where my grandpa was
Uh-huh.
and my grandma, so this is why the location
I
and,
see.
is where the where the stone is.
Uh-huh. Now, another reason why Phil mentioned that you had another motive for putting that stone, uh, because something about your family or Loreto not getting the credit that was his credit, but everybody else got credit except him. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, the Trujillos ran off with all the notoriety in
Of,
the
of,
settlement
of settling Aguamansa.
of settling Aguamansa, and there was a lot of people that were left out.
Uh-huh. Because I understand there were about 40 families that
I
were.
would imagine,
Yeah.
yeah, pretty close to that. And to my way of thinking and analyzing this situation out, I figured that my great-grandfather was just as important to the settlement, if not more so, because he was the only person that had the general store on the settlement itself. So there was a lot of people, including the Trujillo family, that had to depend on him for their supplies. And I would imagine that along with the basic needs such as the staples that are necessary for everyday life, that he probably must have had some firearms along with ammunition and so on and so forth, because the Trujillos were like hired guns. They had to protect Bandini, the rancho owner, from raids on his cattle.
Now tell me who Bandini was.
Bandini was the owner of the San Bernardino Rancho.
Okay.
I believe in Southern California there was about 72 different ranchos, and I can't name them
Right,
all.
but, yeah, but they were all
But,
land grants from the either the, I guess, the King of Spain and also the Mexican government.
Yeah, yeah.
They were given to people that were part of the Mexican administration.
Yes,
And Bandini was one of these
yes.
landowners.
Prior to him, it was Lugo.
Uh-huh.
Lugo had it, and I can't remember who the other one was.
Mhm.
Lugo and Bandini were the main ones
The landowners of the area.
at that particular time frame, yes.
And getting back to your grandfather and your motivation to make sure that your grandfather is given the recognition that he deserved for being part of the settlement of the Aguamansa area.
Yes, I wanted to bring it to light, and not only because of him, but others that have been left out of the settlement.
Mhm.
There was a family, particular family by the last name of Moya,
Yes,
that
yes.
kept popping up in my research,
Uh-huh.
and nobody has ever mentioned that family. I got my cousin Carol working on that right now
Mhm.
to bring that family to light.
And how is Carol Galvez?
Yes.
Carol Galvez. How is she related to you? Is she also part of the Aguamansa families?
Yes, again, her mother was my dad's first cousin,
Okay.
and that's how we're related.
And what was her last name?
At that time,
Yes.
Galvez.
Galvez?
Mhm.
And her maiden name? Your dad's cousin? Was she part of the any of the?
Gaitan.
Gaitan. Okay. Gaitan. And they were related to the Aguamansa families?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, let's see, Carol's mother's mother, I believe, no, I don't believe, she was in Aguayo, so there's a connection,
Okay, there's a connection.
yeah.
So you go back a long,
Oh,
long
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you completed the project. You completed the project of your great-grandfather, you said 4 years ago?
Yes, about that,
Uh-huh.
4 or 5 years ago,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
And have you had any comments about about your project?
The only comment would be that impressed, and we're gonna have a get-together again sometime this year. And probably review a lot of what took place the first time
Uh-huh.
around. Actually, what I did was reunite the family that had kind of strayed from one another and weren't really in real close contact. I kind of brought them back together. The communications are now more towards one another rather than to.
How did you get these families together, Frank?
I put out the word of what I was going to do with the plaque
Okay.
to some of my cousins, and I told them to relate it rather relay the message on to their families.
To the rest of the families?
Yeah, and we all got together at.
When did you get together? What year did you get together?
Oh man,
Last 10 years or?
it had to be when I put the plaque down.
Oh, so
that's
just
got to
a-
be about 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, okay, so just recently then?
Yeah,
Recently.
but never before.
Oh.
We never got together.
And how was the attendance at the?
Great, great. I took them all to breakfast at one of the local restaurants there in Colton,
Uh-huh.
and it went off real well.
It was a good reunion then,
It was, yes.
yeah. Was everybody in Aguayo, or were they other members of the other families that were in Aguamansa?
For the most part, I think they were more favoring the Aguayo
Uh-huh.
part of it.
Okay.
This borough that you see here,
Mm-hmm.
you seen it just a little while ago.
Yeah, it's down at the bottom, there, Pauline, Aguayo, Borough.
Borough, yeah.
Uh-huh,
That's a French name there,
uh-huh.
Borough. And I didn't know this until we all got together, that a cousin, Pauline, was one of Pauline's sons, Frank, and I were talking, and I come to find out that his grandpa is still alive, and he's living in France.
Mm-hmm.
He was a Frenchman that come over here and settled the Aguamansa area
Ah,
as a farmer, yeah. That all come out, that all come out on all this research that I did. A lot
well, you're
of
busy with your research then.
it. Well, still, yes.
Yeah, you're just scratching the surface now, aren't you?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What I need to do is pin the clan down, the Aguayo brothers and sisters. I know about his parents and where they're from, but nothing on his brothers or sisters.
Uh-huh.
For some reason or another, the records don't show because they're too old,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and I can't get a line, but I will eventually crack it.
Well, I think you will, because if you're persistent enough to make sure that your family gets together again after all these years.
After all these years, yeah.
No, you will, Frank, you will. Now, let me see. Your dad was Joseph Robert Aguayo.
Yes.
Okay. Was he raised in the Aguamansa area, or did his family move to La Calle Cinco?
How can I put this? Let me see. The Aguamansa settlement, as far as I know, and the way I figured it out, was from where the cemetery itself is, east to where 3rd Street was.
Okay, Colton and Colton.
Yeah, and that was, what, 2 or 3 miles long
Mm-hmm,
on either side of the road, Aguamansa Road.
mm-hmm,
That was the Aguamansa settlement as far as I knew it.
uh-huh.
And it eventually turned the corner or rather continued straight to 5th Street. And then they started filling in 5th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And that become the Aguamansa settlement, I guess. Could that be politically named? In other words, Aguamansa settlement and then Colton or 5th Street or
Well,
whatever?
let me ask you this, when did your dad live on 5th Street?
He was born there.
He was born on Fifth Street?
Yes,
Okay.
as far as I know.
And when was your
And
dad,
so were his sisters.
and when was your dad born, Frank?
1912, I think.
1912?
Around 13, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So he,
And-
your grandfather then settled in Fifth Street, and your father was born on Fifth Street in that area?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And his sister, Annie Dukes, was the oldest of the family, and she lived on to be about 98 years old.
Mm,
She just recently passed on.
uh-huh,
And my dad, I think, was the maybe the fourth down from the family. So he wasn't the oldest. He wasn't in the middle. He was kind of one of the younger ones.
yeah, he was at the tail end almost, because you had Anne Aguayo, and she married a Dukes,
Yeah.
and then you have Luisa Aguayo Arias, so she married an Arias,
Yep.
and you had Esther Aguayo Alba, she married an Alba, and then your dad, and then you had Pauline Aguayo Borra,
Barrow,
Borro. Now tell me about your
That's
dad.
all right.
Tell me about your dad. He was raised on Fifth Street, and
Yes. The Depression, I think he was born a little after the Depression started,
mhm,
or a little before, excuse me.
okay,
And there wasn't, excuse me, there wasn't much work around the Colton area at that particular time, except the harvesting of the citrus
yeah,
industry.
La Volucha,
Bavolucha, yeah.
yeah, orange picking.
Right. So he had a first cousin that ran a crew of pickers. And
Now,
so
who
on
was
and so
that? Who was his first cousin?
His first cousin was Henry Martinez.
I know Henry. I had no idea that he
Yeah.
was a contractor.
Yeah, he was. He did it for many years, and then he
Uh-huh.
went to work for the city of
Uh-huh.
Colton.
I'll be darned.
And
And
so
he's related to you then, kind of a distant
just
relative
a-
of yours,
Yeah, he was first cousin of my dad.
Uh-huh,
His Martinez's mother was in Aguayo.
uh-huh,
Okay, so that's how he was able to actually put us in a nice little home. We had our Christmases and our Thanksgivings
Uh-huh,
and so on and so
uh-huh.
forth.
And then your dad moved to San Pedro.
Yes, during when the Second War broke out,
Uh-huh.
yeah, we moved into San Pedro.
Now, why did you move to San Pedro from Colton?
No work in Colton anymore, and
Okay.
he had a chance to better himself.
Uh-huh. And what did he do in San Pedro?
Well, he become a defense worker during the Second World War,
Uh-huh.
and I have some funny memories of that.
Share one of those funny memories.
I will. We were on the families that were living during that era, the Second World War, were on a coupon ration type situation. You could only buy, say, one pair of shoes a year. You couldn't buy meats, say a nice juicy steak or something like that, unless you knew somebody else that could get it for you or something like that. Black market.
Or gasoline.
Or
something.
gasoline, yeah, you were rationed on gas.
Uh-huh.
And so me and my brother one day, since San Pedro had a big harbor and there was great fishing anywhere you went, we took off one day and he had a brand new pair of shoes that my mom had just bought with the coupon. So we had all our fun and everything and ran off, and he left his shoes down there. So when we got back home, he's missing his shoes. And in order not to get into any trouble with my dad or mom, I took off to see if I could find them. I couldn't find his shoes. Somebody made off with them. So luckily, my grandma come to rescue because she would share her coupon with my mom, and she had an extra shoe on, so she gave her, and she was able to buy him another pair.
He lucked out, right?
Yeah, he did,
He
yeah.
lucked out. He's saved by the bell.
So it was, I mean, we went through that kind of a living type situation during
Uh-huh.
the Second World War.
Okay.
You couldn't get ice cream, candy. You couldn't get none of that, none of the goodies that kids love, you
Uh-huh,
know.
uh-huh.
They weren't available. They were, everything went towards the war effort.
But your dad had a job in
Oh, he
San
had a
Pedro.
job, yeah. He landed, he become a Navy certified welder.
Mhm.
Got a job with the naval shipyards there in Terminal Island, which is a ferry ride across from San Pedro, and never looked back. He did
Mhm.
real well.
And then later on, in 47, you moved back to Colton.
Back to Colton.
Now, why did you move back to Colton?
Well, the war was over with, right?
Okay.
And employment went down the tube again.
Oh, in San Pedro?
Yeah, so he couldn't find no welding jobs anymore, so he had to come back. And eventually found a job with PFE.
Pacific Fruit Express.
Sure, he had something to offer. Now he was a welder,
Uh-huh.
and he landed a job almost immediately.
Well, very good. And tell me about you. How old were you when you got back from St. Peter?
I was probably 14,
Okay.
or somewhere around there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, did you go to school Garfield or Wilson, or where did you go to
I
school?
wound up, I was out of the district of my old alma mater over there.
Your alma
Gra-
mater was San Salvador?
No, it was Grant School, and then at that time, Roosevelt Junior High,
Okay.
which later become Colton Junior High.
Yeah.
And found out that I was not in that district anymore, so I had to go, I had to make a change from there over to Wilson.
Okay. Okay.
And that's where my baptism of fire come about.
What do you mean your baptism of fire?
All of a sudden, I'm a little bit different from everybody else.
What
because
made you different?
I couldn't speak fluent Spanish.
Ah. Okay.
So what?
So what happened? Did they pick on you?
Well,
Make
they
fun
pick-
of you, or
They picked on
did
me.
they beat you
and,
up?
And they tried. And they nailed me with the old proverb of pocho.
Uh-huh.
So I immediately learned what a pocho was.
Uh-huh. And the pocho is?
A person that's not native to Mexico and doesn't speak the language that
Okay.
well.
Okay.
And isn't it funny? All of those people that used to make fun of me, their children all of a sudden were educated in the English-speaking schools, and they had to learn English.
So you were an outcast when you went to
I
Wilson.
was. But
And how did that make you feel?
I felt all right because I'm the kind of guy that I can adapt.
Roll with the punches. Eh?
Yeah, I had friends yet that I had made from before I left Fort Pedro, San
Okay.
Pedro.
Okay.
And those guys come to my rescue in a way, you know,
Oh, good.
only
Okay.
to an extent.
Okay.
And there was a lot of them that knew my family also, so
Uh-huh.
I got by. The only ones that I had trouble was with the immigrants, because we had I don't know if you remember the Bracero program?
Yes. Yes. 42.
Back in them
yes.
days,
Yes.
yeah.
The 40s.
And
Yes.
a bunch of them come in and they, of course, they hit the barrios, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so that sort of added the fuel to the fire of either you speak Spanish and be a Mexican or we'll beat the hell out of you, one of the two, you know, and I got by all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned,
Well, you
I
had-
learned real quick.
Oh, yeah. Imagine, because you had the our Chicano kids
That's right.
that spoke. They were bilingual.
Yeah.
And then you had the braceros that were monolingual Spanish.
Yeah,
And then you had Frank.
yeah, I had friends, that's right,
Yeah, you had Frank.
yeah.
And did you graduate from Wilson?
I did. Something else that we had. I was on the tail end of the Pachuco era.
Okay.
Pachucos had their own way of living,
Uh-huh.
And they weren't evil or mean. As a matter of fact, they were pretty respectable kids, except for their dress code.
Okay.
The local police station took an exception to peg pants, for example.
Yes, the pig pants
And the big
hat.
melenas that they used to use.
Yeah.
The big hairdos. you know.
Yes.
Isn't it kind of funny and ironic that today, if you don't have your hair at least down to your ankles, I guess, you're not in, you know? And it's quite a change from that period to now,
Uh-huh.
in the sense that the way I would have to say, the local police station looked at it. We were not exactly cool, but yet respectable within our own group of people, mothers and fathers, immediate families, very respectable.
Uh-huh.
They also took exception to the double-soled shoes.
The
I don't know if you remember
the
that.
ox blood, double sword,
Ox-
ox blood,
Blood, yeah.
with the horseshoe taps.
Yeah, Cordovan shine, but you always kept them perfectly shined.
Yeah.
And got in on that era.
Did you dress with the pants?
I would peg them. There was a way that you could fold them. I couldn't afford a tailor.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't go up to a tailor shop and get them tailored.
And did you have a long coat?
No.
No.
That was before me.
Okay.
That was the days of Sleepy Hollow in L.A.
Uh-huh. The
Yeah.
42, 44 area.
They
yeah.
started all that
Yeah.
stuff up there.
Uh-huh.
So, like I say, I had to adapt to many styles, many customs, and so on and so
Uh-huh.
forth.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but
So even though you were born in Colton, you were when you left and came back, you were kind of an outsider.
outsider.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
And then you have a picture here. The picture here, Frank, the picture over there.
Well,
The
the
picture over there.
Wilson.
Yes, over there. Mira.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. There you go. And you have a picture. Mira, point it to Frank. Point it over to Frank. Show it. No. Stay here, but just show it to Frank.
Oh,
You can't make out Frank, but we have a picture of the graduating class of what year was that, Frank?
47.
1947.
Wilson Junior High.
Wilson Junior High School, okay? And what we'll do, Frank, we'll borrow it and scan it, and then Frank will tell us who the names of these people are. Yeah. Now, this is, where are you in this picture, Frank?
Very hard to see.
A ver, ¿dónde estás?
Right over here.
Oh, you were a handsome guy, ¿verdad? ¿Verdad? Say yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you were a handsome guy,
I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. And do you still, I would imagine you remember most of these people that graduated with you.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember a lot of the names,
Uh-huh.
but
Do you still see any of these people?
no, I haven't.
Uh-huh.
For some reason or another, we all went our different ways and never looked back, I guess.
Uh-huh. You said that when you came back from San Pedro, your house was located on Walnut Street.
Yeah, when we moved in with my Aunt Dolly, yes.
Uh-huh. And Walnut is only a half a block from Fifth Street?
Yeah, it's
Right
very
there.
close, running the same direction,
Okay,
north and south.
yeah. And you mentioned something about Jimmy's Liquor Store on Fifth Street.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Reese.
Jimmy Reese. And you know, Henry is back there, Henry Vasquez, and Henry lives next to the little store now. That's where his home is now.
Vasquez.
Yeah. What was your dad's name, Henry?
David,
David Vasquez.
my grandfather, Sotero.
Yeah. But anyway, tell us a story about Jimmy Reese, the liquor store.
The way he was able to get the property?
Yeah.
Well, that property was my grandfather's at one time.
And your grandfather's name was?
Manuel Aguayo,
Okay.
okay? His dad was Loreto Aguayo.
Mm-hmm.
And very nice house, presentable, modern for that type, for that particular year. And for some reason or another, the property taxes got neglected. Well, Reese found this out, and in his research, I guess he found out that he could get it for
Paying back
a
taxes.
good
Yeah.
price, you
Uh-huh.
know, back taxes. So he went over and paid the taxes on it and was able to get the property.
Ah, okay. So that's the history of that little store then.
That little store, yeah.
Little
And
store.
then he built the store in front, yeah.
Okay. And then from Walnut, you moved to Sixth Street, La Calle Seis.
Yeah.
La
yeah,
Calle Seis.
yeah. Oh, by the way, I have to mention Trini Bocanegra's little store that was there.
Uh-huh.
Everybody went to that store on Fifth Street.
Was
You-
that part of the liquor store?
No, that was, I don't think he had a liquor license. He sold the necessary items for Mexican families.
Where was that store located?
Pardon me?
Where was that store located?
On Fifth Street?
Fifth and what? N?
Was it next to the liquor store?
No, there was no liquor store there.
Or Jimmy's?
Oh, he was next to Bocanegra's little store.
Jimmy was.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jimmy was.
By the way, there was also, since I got a flashback on this, in front of Jimmy Reese was a sort of a vacant lot with a nice big trailer on it. And the person that lived in that trailer was a Verdugo.
Also part of the Wamansa settlement, yes.
And his sister turned out to be Elena Verdugo, the movie actress in the old early days.
Hmm.
Yeah. So he was linked with her, and he owned that property around
Yeah.
where he stayed there for years.
Ah,
And we also had a senor by the name of Joe Young. Joe Young was, at the time that I interviewed him, was about 90 years old. First thing I asked him is what he did for a living. And he didn't hesitate. Right away, he said he was a bronc buster. It kind of got me by surprise that everybody was picking oranges at that time or working for the cement plant or some other place. Yeah, he was a bronc buster for a big horse ranch in Azusa, California.
uh-huh.
I says, well, how did you wind up in Colton? He says, well, my roots are here. I said, well, how did you get from Azusa over here? You know, the roads were all beat up in them days. He says, oh, we didn't even use a road. He says, we'd follow the rivers, the dried up rivers, and eventually it would bring us into Colton.
Ah,
Interesting.
was he related to any of the families of Wamansa?
We're working on that part right now
Okay.
in our Carol has run across a Young, and she hasn't revealed the fact that I interviewed a Young in Colton, so we're gonna find out if they were connected or not.
Very good.
Yeah.
Now tell me about your house on Sixth Street.
The house on Sixth Street was an old house.
It was it close to N Street, La Calle N?
Yeah, well, N Street was the street running in front.
Uh-huh.
Sixth Street was running north and south
Uh-huh.
and east and west.
Okay,
Right on the corner, we were right on the corner there.
okay.
And we made do what we could out of the little house. And I lived there until I turned 18, and then I joined the Navy when the Korean War broke out.
Before we get to the Korea War, tell me about your pals there on Sixth Street. Who were your pals?
Yeah, sure. Sippy Carlos.
Sippy was your,
Yeah.
Okay.
Good friend.
uh-huh,
LV Villalobos.
Elvi Villalobos, okay.
And then we had our Joe Louis of the barrio, so to say, Pete Gonzalez,
Pete Gonzalez.
and his brother Tony Gonzalez. Pete, we would get a hold of whenever we had people that we couldn't take care of ourselves. And he would take care of business.
Was he a boxer or just a good
He
fighter?
was anything that you wanted him to be. He was tall, he was about 5'11", and wiry. He wasn't fat, and he had endurance. So if somebody got out of line with us, we'd sick Pete on him.
Uh-huh.
And everything seemed to run pretty smooth once they knew who we were connected with, you know.
Now, did you have a name for your group or
No, we weren't.
just the
no,
pals of?
No, we weren't a clique or a gang or anything like that.
You were just
There was no
neighborhood friends.
gangs in them
You were
days.
just neighborhood friends, eh?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The people that did name themselves were people that were a little financially better off than I was,
Uh-huh,
and
uh-huh.
most of the guys that I hung around with.
Uh-huh,
Like, for example, we had the Gents in Colton, in South Colton.
uh-huh.
Olivas were in that group of people.
Well, Olivas were on 7th and
7th and
and M Street,
M,
yeah.
yeah.
Pretty close to your neighborhood.
Right across the street from the panaderia. there.
Martinez Panaderia.
Martinez, yeah.
But they were pretty, around the corner from your neighborhood.
That's
Just about,
correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very short distance.
What about Abe Beltran? He's also from N Street.
He was my next door neighbor.
I'll be darned.
Yes.
Tell me about Abe back then.
Abe was a outward guy. He loved to pick on his sisters. It didn't take much for him to pick on them either, because I could hear him screaming and hollering all the time.
You mentioned one of his sisters before, that she married,
Oh, yeah, Stella married the chief of, I forget what Indian tribe in.
the Palm Springs?
Palm Springs,
Uh-huh,
and that tribe owns and still owns the airport there.
uh-huh.
And he used to drive my sister become Stella Beltran's comadre,
Uh-huh.
and every once in a while Stella and her husband would come down and visit her. Always had the newest car you could think of.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he
What, was it a Cadillac?
Cadillacs, Buicks,
Uh-huh.
yeah, anything that that would satisfy his fancy, I guess he had.
And you lived just a few houses from 7th Street.
About a block away.
And back in those days, 7th Street was the Broadway of South Colton. Why did they call it that?
There was so much going on all the time. When I'm joking around with my friends, I says, boy, we had a lot of main events on 7th Street, didn't we? He says, oh yeah, any Saturday, tune in. You didn't have to tune in, just walk down there and about 7, 8 o'clock at night, maybe even 9 around through there. Somebody was beating the hell out of somebody out in front of the bar there.
Uh-huh.
Or arguments, or husband and wives, because the sombrero was right there.
The sombrero was
Yeah.
there. And who won the sombrero? Do you remember who?
Yeah, some guy by the name of Militon Noriega.
Ah, Milton Noriega.
Yeah, he
Okay.
was one of the biggies, him and Don Polonio Caldera. He had the local tortillas shop.
Uh-huh.
He sold tortillas and chicharrones and,
Meats and
almost all your needs.
Calderia. You also mentioned that Calderia had a swimming pool over in your
He-
neck of the woods, 5th Street.
He absolutely did. He was sports-minded enough to realize that we did not have the privileges of going to the pool, the municipal swimming pool downtown. So he says, okay, I'll build us a pool. He built an Olympic-sized swimming pool on South 5th Street, down there by Long's Dairy.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And not, and on the other side of that swimming pool, he also built an Olympic-sized boxing arena, and he would promote professional boxing. We had a local black fighter by the name of Chalky Wright. in the
Right, okay. Yeah.
And he was one of the main.
Chalky Wright, Chalky
Chalky
Wright.
Wright, yeah.
One of
South
the few black families in Colton.
Yeah, he could, very few. He could speak fluent
Mm-hmm.
and
Spanish?
Spanish, yeah.
You could speak Spanish
Yeah,
fluently?
well, Spanish and Chicano, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And so the swimming pool was Olympic size. It had a 30-foot diving board on it. And one guy by the name of Mon Vasquez. Your last name is Vasquez. Do you
My
know who
uncle.
I'm talking about?
Yeah, he's my uncle.
Was he?
He still is. He's alive.
Is he still alive?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Just saw him a week ago.
Him and I were very good friends. We used to bowl together. But anyway, he was the only one that could get up there and do dives that were that you could see he had had instructions or knew what he was doing when he would be up there.
Uh-huh.
One of the only guys that could get up on that board and do flips and what have you.
Did you swim in that pool?
I went up with him to the 30-footer. I was only about 10, I guess, 11. I jumped off. I didn't dive. I jumped. Because Mon was the type of person he would dare you or bring out the daredevil in you, you know. And that's why I used to get along with him so well. Tell him you met Frank Aguayo.
I will tell him.
And then he's interested in getting together with him.
That would be fabulous. He's
Yeah.
he's not well, but
Oh,
he.
well, he's
just
way
came-
up in age, isn't he?
Yeah, he's
90-something.
91, 92, something like that.
And if he can't place me, tell him the bowler, Frank Aguayo, the bowler, that used to bowl with him.
The bowler. Okay.
And
Tom, just before we go any further, that was Caldera, and I think you said Calderilla. Juan Caldera.
Juan Caldera.
Caldera, yeah,
Caldera.
excuse me, that's right.
You missed me up, Frank, on that one.
Pardon me?
You missed me up on that one.
I'm sorry.
No, he said Caldera, but then you said Calderilla.
Oh, okay,
So just.
I thought,
just
yeah,
clarify.
Don Polonio Caldera, yeah.
okay. And he also had a baseball diamond.
He had a baseball diamond, but that was very minor to what he really, the big promotion that he had. And it would take a lot of people, it would be very hard to convince a lot of people that we actually had bullfights
Hmm.
on South Fifth Street, on some of his,
So
on
he had
his ball field.
he had a bull ring then.
I think the bull ring was before the baseball.
Okay.
And the first baseball team was the Colton Cement Plant.
Uh-huh.
They were the semi-pros of that area in
And-
them days.
Yeah, but his team were the Cubs. Were the Cubs.
Caldera?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, were the Cubs, yeah. And also, he had a dance place there.
Yes, he did. It was called Cubs Dance Hall. They had weekly dances, and they just happened to be in back of my great uncle's house,
Uh-huh.
and they would hire him as a bodyguard, you know, as a bouncer or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. And he kind of kept order around there because he was pretty good.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, the dance hall, that particular dance hall was situated over towards the cemetery in South Colton, or Awamansa,
Mm-hmm.
and it bordered Riverside County and San Bernardino County.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom and some of her friends and my dad, whenever they get together, would talk about that, how the dance hall was split in half, one side Riverside County and the other side San Bernardino. And my mom would say, see those people sitting over there, they're from Riverside. And the others would say, see those people sitting over there, they're from San Bernardino. So, that's some of the little things that used to go on.
Yeah. Let me ask you, getting back to Sixth Street. Sixth Street.
Yeah.
You went to Colton High School,
Yes.
and what year in high school did you join the Navy? Your sophomore year?
I was having trouble in high school,
Mm-hmm.
not academically.
What kind of trouble?
Trouble with the fact that I didn't have enough clothes to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 shirts and maybe 2 pairs of pants and one pair of shoes. And that just didn't hit me right because I have to say that the girls were really in back of me in them days. And how could I play the part if I've only got 2 pairs of pants and 2 pairs of whatever, and I can't take nobody out on a date because I've got no money, and that's, if it was in the summertime, yes, because I would work. But during the school years, I didn't. So that kind of discouraged me, and I got down on schoolwork. I started ditching. And then the thing that really saved me in that particular time frame was the fact that the Korean War broke out in 1951. And at that particular time, all my friends were being drafted. They were, here one day and the next day they were in boot camp. So I figured it this way: if I had to die, because they were fighting out there, they were using real bullets.
Mm-hmm.
That if I had to die, which way do I prefer on dying? With somebody coming at me with a rifle or a sword or something like that on the ground, or do I choose some other way? So I says, well, I can settle that. I finally made up my mind to go take 3 tests. I took 3 tests. I failed 2 and passed 1. I passed the Navy test, which was the hardest, I guess. And the next thing I knew, I was on my way to boot camp.
And this was your sophomore year in school?
I didn't even complete the sophomore year.
Uh-huh.
They predicted that I would not pass none of the tests.
Uh-huh. And how long were you in the Navy?
I was in the Navy the 4 years,
And did you
duration of the war.
did you have a chance to go overseas?
Yes, I did. As fate would have it, or I call it fate, or destiny,
Uh-huh.
I was ready to die for my country. That was the utmost thing I had in the back of my mind. Because, like I say, some of these guys were not coming back. So I'm ready to go. So what happens? They assign me to a ship that is leaving for Newport, Rhode Island, and that was my home base for the 4 years that I was in the service. That was my home port.
And when did you get back to Colton?
I got discharged in 1955.
In 1955?
Yes.
And before I ask you another question, I understand that you were quite a dancer.
Yes, I could hold my own. Let's put it that way.
And where did you
I
dance?
wasn't no Fred Astaire, but I could trip the light fantastic with some of the best.
And the dance place that was very popular was
The Valley Ballroom, of course.
there on Colton Avenue?
Uh,
Where the
Colton Avenue, yeah.
Yeah, Colton
Uh-huh,
Avenue.
yeah.
Yeah.
Where Sears is now.
Yes,
Yeah.
the Valley Ballroom.
They also had, what was it, Meadowbrook? No, not Meadowbrook. a little lake in back of that in the old days.
Urbita.
Urbita?
Urbita, yeah,
Urbita Springs.
Urbita Springs.
Urbita Springs, right.
So you were
I-
quite a dancer then, Frank.
Well, I got a little Irish gal when I hit iron, and that would prove that, yes.
Uh-huh,
Uh-huh.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
I still remember her name, too.
Ooh,
Terry Duffy,
and where did you meet her?
Londonderry, Ireland. Huh?
Where did you meet her?
At the USO Club in Londonderry, Ireland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But when you came back, um, your future wife, was she impressed with your dancing, or was it?
I met her at the Valley Ballroom,
Okay,
yes.
and what's her name?
Her name was Lydia Salazar.
Okay, okay. Was she
And-
from Colton or Purdue?
She was right there in San Bernardino off of Waterman, a place called Meadowbrook,
Yes.
right there in that area, yeah.
Uh-huh.
There's a funny story, the way that I met her, or the
Okay.
conditions.
Yeah, tell us.
I seen her and her sister, just doing whatever young ladies do, talking and going with the music and what have you. So I picked the one I wanted to dance with out. And I first had to take her sister out so that she could introduce me to her sister, the one that I eventually married. And I got to meet her, and we got to talking and dancing. And I found out that her and 5 other girls had been chaperoned that night by my future wife's grandpa, who loved his cerveza dearly.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So he wasn't nowhere in sight by the time I met her and started trying to date her or get acquainted with her would be a better way of putting it, I guess. And maybe about an hour after I got acquainted with her a little bit and talking with her, I felt the dance hall shaking, kind of like an earthquake or something. It's just my funny way of saying that her grandpa was on her way over to where we were at. And the first thing that come out of his mouth was, "Te está molestando este joven." And my wife said, "No, Grandpa,
Is
no,
this
sir."
guy bothering you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Está todo bien. I thought to myself, wow, he's a big guy. He was husky. Anyway, there's a funny ending to that. Later on, after I got married, I married the same girl. I used to talk with, his name was Abundio, Sororio. Hey, Abundio, I would say, you were quite the dude as far as chaperoning, huh? He says, "Mira, Franque, that's right," he said. "But I lost 3 girls that night." He says, "I don't know where in the heck they went, but they got away from me." He says, "So I wasn't that good that night." He says, "Even you got away with one of them." And
So much for the
so much for the
chaperone.
introduction and the chaperoning and all that, yeah. Okay,
So after you got married, you moved back to Colton?
well, never left Colton, actually.
Oh, okay.
I come back to Colton. My mom and dad had moved into Fontana by then.
Uh-huh.
But I stayed. I rented a place after I got married because I married when I was in the service yet,
Mhm.
the last part of it to get it over with. And I stayed in Colton, rented, and got introduced to all my rights as a GI and took advantage of everything.
Before we get involved in talk about that, tell me about your family. Did you have any kids? Children? Do you have any children?
Me?
Yes, you and your wife.
I had one.
Just one?
I had the misfortune of marrying a girl that whose heart was not exactly healthy.
Uh-huh.
So I had to kind of taper myself to her needs,
Mhm.
which I wanted 6 or whatever come was all right with me. I was ready do whatever I needed to do on my part. But it didn't happen that way for me. I had one, and that one turned out to be pretty good. He athletically was a good athlete.
Mm-hmm.
He had pitching talents that almost got the local Little League into the World Series in them days. There was no double elimination. You lost one game in them days. And you were done.
What was his name?
Nick.
Nick?
Yeah.
Nick Aguayo?
Nick Aguayo, yeah.
Uh-huh. Was he in your class, Frank?
Yes, he was.
He was in Frank's class.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
he was in Frank's class. Yeah.
I think he even ran track there at the school.
Well, he was probably involved in all of the
Yeah,
sports. I
yeah.
know he was involved in baseball
Uh-huh.
at the school,
Yeah.
in addition to community baseball.
The beauty part about it in them days, he was a lefty. You know, and they really used to take a double look at lefties in them days.
Mm-hmm.
His coach in Colton High was Sheehan. Sheehan wrote some letters to Arizona State, and they wanted to look at him. But he got dissuaded
Mm.
and never got nowhere with it.
What about work, Frank? Where did you work after you left the Navy?
There's a funny story there. Immediately after getting out of the Navy, I didn't have nothing to turn to yet, except for my mustering out pay and so on and so forth. And we stretched that a little bit. But my wife luckily had applied at Norton Air Base for a typist job and got it. So that kind of eased the pressure on me a little bit. But old macho me, I had to get out there and prove that I could cut the mustard, you know. I didn't just marry just to marry. So I looked and looked and looked, and I finally found me a job in Fontana at a chicken distribution place, Swift, I think it was. That was one of the hardest jobs I ever had in my life. I didn't know a person could get that tired. I was on the tail end of a production line that ladies were responsible for. They were packing chickens. And I mean, the boxes, once they were, they had the boxes that they were filling, they would come on a conveyor belt. I would ice them and pellet and put them on pellets, getting ready for shipment, right? The only thing is, I had a gondola that I worked out of with ice. And my responsibility was to ice them. But the gondola was so tall that I could only move from here up. I couldn't get my body into it. So it was all arm work. By the time the day was over with, I thought my arms were gonna fall off.
And what year was this, Frank?
This was in 52.
And
No,
how-
no. 56, 57.
And how long were you there?
Luckily, I had put in an application at Norton Air Base, and I stayed there for about a year.
Uh-huh.
And then Norton called me,
And then you were at Norton for how long?
till I got out, till my working days, well, until I retired out of there.
Uh-huh. And then how old were you when you retired from Norton?
I took a medical out of there
Uh-huh.
in 1968.
And then after that,
I went to work for the Colton School District.
and what did you do for the Colton School District?
I drove a school bus
Okay.
for,
How many years?
about 8 or 9 years, I guess, yeah.
A good long time.
Yeah.
For Amos Kent?
Pardon me?
You worked with Amos Kent?
Amos Kent, yeah.
Mhm. And also, you mentioned, Frank, that a question that I have here, question number 4, it says, how did World War II in the Korean conflict affect the lives of people in Colton? You mentioned that when you got back, you were able to take classes at Valley College, and you got paid for those classes in the GI Bill.
Uh-huh.
And did that help tremendously?
Absolutely. amongst my friends, we used to talk, and a lot of times, joking around, they would ask me what my major was. And I'd say, oh, that's easy. I said, I'm majoring in $173 a month.
You're majoring in what?
In $173 a month.
Was that full-time or half-time?
That was a full-time load
At Valley
at
College?
Valley College.
And how long did you do that for?
I did it until I ran it out.
Which is how many
Okay,
years?
so about almost 2 years,
Okay.
almost a year and a half, something like that,
Uh-huh.
2 years. And the next thing I knew, I had pretty close to 60 units. I only had about maybe 5 or 6 to make, and had the 60 and get a degree, you know? So I went ahead and did it and completed it, and did what I didn't do when I was 18,
Uh-huh.
you know? I got my GED in the Navy. I kept studying. I kept after it. I kept my, you know, any way I could put knowledge in my head, I
Yeah.
would do it. And eventually I got that degree. And then that wasn't the end of it. The Vietnam era extended another year onto my schooling that I would call a year and a half actually qualify for. So I went and took the Colton offered a course in upholstery, furniture. So they set up a class at Ellis Burney in Colton, in the back there. They give them one of the classrooms, and I went there for a year and a half and majored in, well, this time.
$173?
No, not, no, this was in, I had to learn because I couldn't, I would be harming myself if I didn't, you know.
Then
So I
we-
got to be pretty good at it. I learned how to do almost all kinds of upholstery work.
Uh-huh,
I didn't get into cars because there was too many people in it.
uh-huh.
And my side work, I was doing all right with it.
Well, you know, also in the early days, we residents of South Colton, we couldn't buy houses north of the railroad tracks.
Right.
Now, did the GI Bill help you buy a house north of the railroad tracks?
Yes, and the people that spearheaded that movement was the Second War veterans. Second
Okay.
World War veterans
Okay.
showed us the way in many ways, in schooling, anything that I needed to know, I could refer to a friend, and he would tell.
Do you remember any of those friends that helped that were World War II veterans from Colton?
Can't remember this one particular guy.
Was it Angie Oliva?
No. Did you know Mercy Beltran,
Yes.
her husband?
Um,
I can't remember his name.
Buck Mora.
Buck Mora. there
Buck
you go.
Mora,
Buck was my guide
yeah.
whenever I needed, because Buck was working out at the base.
Uh-huh.
And so were the Gaitanes, my dad's cousins, and they helped me out. Once I got in, they moved me around, got me into where I was supposed to be, and I wound up with a pretty damn good job.
Uh-huh.
Aircraft mechanic out there was the final thing I did. And
So Buck was one of your mentors then?
yeah.
And he was just also a neighbor of yours on Sixth Street, because he lived around the corner.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right, yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
he married Mercy. Yeah.
And Mercy was Abe's sister,
Yeah,
Abe Beltran's sister.
that's right.
Yeah.
And they eventually had a catering service going.
Yes.
Buck and Mercy,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
They would cater to weddings and what have you.
And you said that you also were able to buy a house past the railroad tracks in North Colton with your GI Bill.
Yes. A lot of the guys that I went into that were in the service at the same time, Korean conflict, were already, some of them had already bought houses. So I fell right into place.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have no troubles.
Uh-huh.
I had to learn the system though, you know. For example, I was awarded a X amount of money, and I figured that, in my way of thinking, I was thinking that maybe that was a one-time deal. But no, I could have bought 3 or 4 houses with the money that I was eligible for. And I bought the house on Acacia Street off of a little old lady, not from Pasadena, from Colton, down there by the municipal park. She was the owner of it, and it's my first house.
Yeah. Before I forget, Frank, I went to school with your brother, Butch,
There,
Butch Aguayo.
there.
Butch was a mean son of a gun.
Only if provoked.
Right, right, right. But I do remember Butch.
Era
yeah.
más travieso
Sí.
than he was,
Yeah.
mean.
Uh-huh,
But he could get mean, that's for sure.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was
He
a
was-
year.
He was, how should I say, a gregarious type person.
Uh-huh.
I mean, his personality spoke for itself, and you couldn't help but to like him
Mm-hmm.
because of that.
Right.
He was a natural-born leader, and but things didn't work out for him.
Uh-huh.
You know, he was an iron worker.
Well, I remember him at Garfield and Wilson School. That's
Yeah.
when I remember him.
Yeah.
I don't remember him in high school.
He learned all the orneriness from his pals.
Uh-huh.
You know, when we come back from San Pedro, we had to turn too. We had to produce a little bit, you know, and show them that you belong in the water. So we did it with flying colors. Of course, we had primos down there yet, and
Yeah.
what have you.
Yeah.
So it was a good upbringing.
Uh-huh.
It was a beautiful upbringing. What it showed me was the love and tightness of a family and what it can mean to you, not only to you, but how it affects other people.
Well, my last question, Frank, was what is the best memory or the best thing that you remember living in Colton, South Colton?
That would have to be respect. Respect is out in front of anything that I think about. There was, at that time, still respect within the families, within the community. You don't have that no more.
Uh-huh. So that's one of the changes that we have now.
It's gone.
Yeah. And let me ask you another question before I forget, but you keep that thought in mind. Eh? Who were the leaders? Who were the leaders, the political leaders in South Colton at that time?
The Olivas were involved.
Olivas,
Padilla was involved.
Pascual, Angel, Frank.
All of them.
Uh-huh.
Cabrera, Nacho, the barber.
Mm-hmm.
He was a motivator more than anything.
Uh-huh.
Pete Lukey, Father Lukey's dad,
Uh-huh.
he was involved.
How about Tony Garcia?
I can't remember. He was an ex-mayor, wasn't he?
No, that was
Garcia.
Frank Gonzalez.
I can't place Tony Garcia.
But anyway, those were the leaders.
Those
that
were the ones that I can remember right
Yeah.
offhand.
Yeah, you mentioned Pete Lukey.
Yeah,
You mentioned the Olivas,
yeah,
Angel and Pascual.
right, right.
And Manuel Padilla.
Not understanding political methods, ideology, and everything else that goes along with it, I didn't have too high an opinion on any of the leaders. I seen a lot of talking and bragging, but I never seen results.
Mhm.
So that kind of pulled me away from the political scene.
Mhm. Getting back to the question, your best memory or your best experience of living in, growing up in Colton?
I mentioned respect.
Uh-huh.
The loyalty that goes along with that respect
Mhm.
is more outstanding in my mind,
Mhm.
in my heart, than anything else. I figure if I can relate to a person in that way, probably 3/4 of any kind of a difficulty of understanding one another, it has already been met.
Mhm.
It makes it easier for me as a grown man and a thinking man to cope with, to think about,
Mhm.
to express it, to live it. I never do anything out of disrespect, or I try not to. The loyalty is 110%.
Mhm.
I'm very loyal. That's what I got out of growing up in South Dakota.
Very good. Frank, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. Thoroughly enjoy your experience in growing up in Colton. And I would like for you to keep in contact with us because I would like to learn more about your family
Okay.
as you develop your family genealogy. So thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Rivera, and it's been, like I say, enjoyable. Not there. Well, how many times has this type of interview or whatever happened? How many times out of a lifetime would this happen to anybody? Not very few and far between. So I consider this a privilege.
Thank you, and we'll make sure that we'll give you a copy of this DVD
Okay.
as soon as we get it together. So thank you again.
Okay, you're welcome.